To our council meeting this morning. Could I please just remind everybody mobile phones off, and we'll take a break around 11:30 for morning tea and lunch at 1 o'clock. And yes, we'll get underway with our meeting this morning. Could I please just remind everybody about the live streaming. Welcome to our live streaming viewers this morning, and also on our council Facebook afterwards. I do a little video if there's anything that's happened through the meeting, just for our website. Right, we'll begin the meeting with Councillor Bentley. Could you please open with the council prayer?
Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants, this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant to ourselves at all times. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
No deal. Right. Thank you. There are no apologies. Just an early departure around 11:30. Thank you.
Same here.
Same for you, right? Thank you. Nice that we know. Right, I move now to urgent items. Oh, that's right, declarations of interest. I've skipped a page. Any declarations of interest? No, none. Any urgent items that are not on the agenda? Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I have a query with regard to the responsibility of councillors on the legality. If somebody falls into the lake and drowns on our new boardwalk, what is the liability likely for us as councillors or the staff?
Yes, well, that's not an urgent item.
It's if you fell off.
Pardon?
It would be if you fell off.
Councillor Bentley, remember we're being respectful to one another. I deem that that's not an urgent item. We have to trust our staff to actually comply with health and safety, and I've been informed that health and safety obligations have all been met. So the issue that you raise, we can put on an agenda item at a later date. Okay. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Mine was from I've got two questions. The first one was the same arena. It's a slightly different. That is that it would be helpful if we could have the health and safety criteria with regard to this matter clarified. Can we have a report on this matter?
This is not, I've deemed this is not an urgent item. These issues were raised, completely canvassed during the whole of the project reports, at every project update. Issues of health and safety were canvassed, and council officers replied, we don't need another update. We just need to trust our staff that they undertake their obligations, and I'm very confident that that is what they are undertaking. So that is not an urgent item.
Point of order, Your Worship. Point of order. These matters, and the same thing happened with Te Manawa, when a safety audit was demanded of Te Manawa after it was commissioned. And, you know, these matters are for the Operations and Monitoring Committee, and we can bring back those reports at Operations and Monitoring as part of reports back on the completion of projects as they come through.
I expect that they will be covered, Councillor Donaldson, and we're all very aware of our obligations. You had a second question?
Yes, I did, yes.
That was urgent item?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
It's very urgent. There's a widespread concern over the significant differences between the table on page 141 of the approved long-term plan and people's actual rates bills. Can we please have an explanation for the differences? Thank you.
That's certainly not an urgent item. That is something that will be put through a correct committee of council, and the variations individuals have been well informed about where to take their concerns. So that is not an urgent item, Councillor McPherson. I think we all need to remind ourselves what are urgent items. That is an item of ongoing business and it will continue to be. So I rule that out of order. Right, we are waiting now for a presentation from Mike Bryant, our Regional Commissioner. I hear he's almost here, so yeah, about 5 minutes away. So we'll move, while we're waiting for Mr Bryant, we'll move to the confirmation of minutes, the council minutes of the 28th of June. Do I have a mover that the council meeting held on the 28th of June be confirmed as a true and accurate record? Moved Councillor Maxwell, seconded Councillor Rotorua. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? You have a question? Right. We move now to the council minutes of the 5th of July, page 17. A mover and a seconder for the motion that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 5th of July be confirmed as a true and correct record. Mover, Councillor Yates, seconder Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. We could move on. We'll move on to the recommendations from other committees. The report of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee on the 8th of July. I need a mover that the report of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting on the 8th of July be received. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Rotorua. A seconder? Councillor Kumar. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. We move now to recommendation 1 of that committee, the adoption of the final Te Oranganui Rāwhiti Mai Eastside Community Wellness Plan. That Council adopt the final Te Oranganui Rāwhiti Mai Eastside Community Wellness Plan, that Council work toward work programs and actions align with the Te Oranganui Rāwhiti Mai Eastside Community Wellness Plan, and that Council notes the progress on the Te Oranganui Rāwhiti Mai Eastside Community Wellness Plan be reported back via Council's Operations and Monitoring Committee on an annual basis. Do I have a mover? Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Yates. All those in favour?
Wait, a discussion?
Well, we are adopting what was discussed in the committee. It's just an adoption.
Yes, I understand. My comment concerns, it's a methodological issue I'd like to raise.
You raised it in the time to raise it was when the committee came to us in the committee, which was the Strategy and Policy and Finance Committee. Council is for signing off the recommendations. So the time for discussion on methodology was at the committee. Is it widely differing from the recommendations about the programs and actions?
No, it's a concern that I've got, and I think it's a legitimate concern, and this is the place for it to be heard, about the nature of the methodology used to generate the plan.
No,
and it's not a peripheral, it is the basis on which we've generated knowledge and policy in this area that I wish to address. And it's not something that should have been...
With respect, you must learn the right time to raise those questions. We had a full presentation to a committee of council, great interchange of questions, and that was the time for that. We are now moving to the adoption of the Eastside Community Wellness Plan. I rule that out of order. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? No. You wish your vote recorded against?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's carried. Welcome, Mike. We'll just finish this recommendation and then we'll be ready. Recommendation 2 was the extending Rotorua Economic Development's role to support Council to deliver on the long-term plan of economic development framework and city centre regeneration objectives. 1, that Council approve the extended role for RED by approving the amendments to the Statement of Intent outlined in section 5.6, that Council note that a subsequent report will detail a terms of reference which prescribes the operational and financial parameters of RED's extended role for approval. Do I have a mover? Thank you. Councillor Kaifong, seconded Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Against? Against 2. It's carried. Right, we'll move back to, no, that's where we'll stop there, I think, and then we'll get on to conference later. Welcome, Mike, this morning, and thank you for coming and presenting this morning on a housing update for the Council at large. Kia ora. Welcome. And for all of us, we've been getting updates on housing, but beautiful to have you here. And would you like to, well, Jocelyn, would you like to make the introductions? I don't think we've had you here in this term, so thank you for coming. Jocelyn, would you make the introductions, please?
Tēnā koutou katoa. It's really awesome to be able to invite our Regional Commissioner Mike Bryant here today to represent MSD and to give us a bit of a briefing on the work of MSD inside our region, in particular inside our district. Mike's been an awesome partner within the work that we've been doing on emergency housing, and in particular we've got really strong relationships with MSD. I'd also like to recognise the Māori, our Mike's colleague, our Māori advisor for MSD for the region, and I'm going to let Mike introduce them both. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you so much. I'm actually just going to hand over to Jacob to start our kōrero. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come along and talk about what MSD and Work and Income are involved in, particularly in Rotorua.
Tēnā rā tātou I roto I tō tātou ko tahitanga. Tēnā rā e te kahurangi I tuku mai te rākau kia māu e tai mai ai ki Wainganui a koutou kai aku rangatira, kai nā tūāhina, kai te pāpā Trevor, tēnei ka mihi ake, tūāhina Jocelyn. Kia marama ai tātou mā te reo tēnei kōrero e tuku, mā Mike e whakapākeha I taku kōrero hei te mutunga. Ko tai mai māu I kone, ka maharake au ki tōku pau whirina ki kia Māori ora. Me ona kōrero he pukenga wai ka puta ko te rākau. He pukenga tangata ka puta ko te kōrero. Tēnei mātau o te mana tū whakahiato tai mai ai ki te whiti kōrero kia koutou. Te nako o taku kōrero e rua noi oho nā take. E ka kōrero mo te manaakitanga, ka kōrero mo te kotahitanga. Tēnei āhuatanga o te manaakitanga, he ākina I te mana o te tangata. Mena tātou ka kōrero mō nā kāinga, haumaru o te hapori, ko te manaakitanga te āhuatanga, hei tū āpapa mō tātou. Ko te manaaki te hunga ka noho korewhare, me te manaaki a tātou a nohoki. Mena he waka moana tēnei, ko tātou nā kai hoea o te waka, me hoe ngātahi tātou. I etahi wā, ka rereke te ia o te hoe, ka whatipe te au o te hoe, enari me kotahi tonu tātou ki te hoe I te kaupapane. he hoa taunaki, he hoa tautoko tātou ki te hapai ake i tō tātou hapore. A tērā te manaakitanga, te kotahitanga kia hoe ngātahi tātou i tēnei waka arataki i te tangata. Ko te mea nui e ahakoa ki hai tātou i whakai i e tahiwa. Me hoe ngātahi tonu tātou e hara i te mea ka whakahē tētahi atu. Enari me u atu tātou ki te whenua haukura, kia tutuki ai tā tātou i wawatatia ai. Hea no. Kārea e tōroa ake te kōrero, i tēnei wā ka tuku atu te rākau ki tōku tūmua ki nei, ki tōku rangatira nei kia Mike, mana e whakapākeha i aku kōrero. Enari, kāhei tonu te mareira, kāhei te whakawhiu pātai mai. O tira, i roto i tō tātou kotahitanga, kei oku rangatira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you, Jacob. Kia ora koutou katoa. I'm Mike Bryant. I'm the Regional Commissioner for MSD for the Bay of Plenty region. I've met many of you, but for those that I haven't, thank you so much for the opportunity to come along and talk about what MSD and Working Income are doing, particularly in Rotorua. As Jacob talked about, we have a very definite strategy or approach about partnering and about working with others and actually being able to take a positive engagement process to collectively address many of the long-term difficult social issues that we're actually trying to deal with each day, each week and each year. As I mentioned, I'm Mike Bryant. I've lived in Rotorua for 11 years. I've been in the role of Bay of Plenty Regional Commissioner for that period of time. Absolutely love Rotorua. It's a great place. Have 5 children. Unfortunately, they're not all now living in Rotorua. Only 2 of them are. But it's certainly been a great place to bring up my family and my children. And I guess that's part of the team that work here in Rotorua, part of their thinking and what they bring to their job each day is to actually make a huge difference to the people that we're here to serve. Just a little bit about MSD. We have 13 regions across New Zealand. So Bay of Plenty is one of those regions. And within the Bay of Plenty, our region goes from Turangi across to Whakatane, Kawarau up to Opotiki, with whānau Apanui up the coast, and then across to Tipuki, Tauranga, and also Karikari, and then back around to Rotorua. Rotorua is right in the middle of our region. It's probably why our regional office is here. It's great for us. We get to have lovely drives around the Bay of Plenty and visit different parts of our region, past wonderful lakes and to beautiful beaches. But it's always great coming back to Rotorua because it feels like it's the place we should be. Unfortunately, we also all know that there's lots of underlying social and other issues within Rotorua that we're working on, and we would love support to actually work on those. Within our Bay of Plenty region, we have 13 working income officers and around about 350 frontline staff who predominantly, unfortunately, deal with the payment of benefits, but we also have a focus on actually connecting people back to employment. Just in our Rotorua office here, we have about 55 frontline case managers, work brokers. And we also have 100 people that are part of a national centralised processing unit. There used to be 15 people in that unit about 3 or 4 years ago, dealing with subsidy payments for employers. That's grown to 100 because we've actually taken a deliberate strategy to encourage our national office and other people to actually grow that unit here, and now there's 100 people within that unit. That's 85 more local people that have actually been able to gain employment. So we think that's a very positive thing. I'm actually here today to support my team and I guess share some of the work and some of the things that they do every day. Absolutely first to admit that we don't get it right every single time. We try to learn when we don't, and we're always interested in getting constructive feedback about things that we can actually do better. As Jacob said, our partnership approach is based on unity and actually working together and actually making a positive difference. And we're always interested in input or suggestions from anybody else that has ideas or things that we could actually work on to make a greater difference. You'll all know that, as I mentioned before, Rotorua has a lot of long-term underlying social issues. We know we've got gangs, drugs, crime, family violence. There's 100 family violence cases every single week in Rotorua. Many of those cases are actually affecting children, with children directly involved or as witnesses of those particular situations. And I'm certainly sure that if you look at many of the underlying social indicators, which I'm sure many of you do, you will notice that Rotorua actually appears in the top 5 for just about every negative social indicator. And I don't mean the top 5%, I mean often first, second or third of all the towns and cities in New Zealand in terms of those negative sort of indicators. Rotorua has the highest, or one of the highest levels of school exclusions for children from schools. Across the Bay of Plenty, a third of young people that are actually in the education system actually leave with absolutely no qualifications whatsoever. And I believe that's only the third that are actually tracked. There's actually something like 20,000 children in benefit families in the Bay of Plenty, about 6,000 in Rotorua. I think a lot of those children have actually left school at a much earlier age and aren't tracked. Rotorua has very high, appears in the first 2 or 3 cities in New Zealand for the use of P, and also we're in the top 5 for gambling and the use of gambling machines and those sorts of things. And these are all things that you know about, but I guess are things that we're trying to deal with and work on every day. We obviously get most of our job satisfaction out of helping people making a difference, and we truly believe that employment is a circuit breaker. I'm really pleased to report that 2,670 people actually exited off the benefit system back into employment in Rotorua in the last year. That was 11,000 across the Bay of Plenty. Unfortunately, with COVID and the effect of COVID, we did have a few more people coming on, and COVID has affected Rotorua more negatively because of the fact that we're a tourism-type town, and it's actually had an impact on many of the tourism-type businesses within Rotorua. At the height of the increase as a result of COVID, which was about December of last year, the number of people on benefit in Rotorua increased to about 9,600. We've actually seen some great progress, and as I mentioned, a lot of people have exited into employment, and we're now down to 8,700, so that's a huge reduction. What I worry about is those that don't exit the welfare system quite quickly. While it's really important to support people in their time of need, the longer you stay on the welfare system, the further away from the labour market you actually are. Across the Bay of Plenty, the peak for COVID, before COVID, there was 28,000 people receiving benefits, and the peak period was 35,000. That's now down to 32,000. So some positive progress that's being made. I just wanted to sort of make some comments. I understand, I don't know if there's any reporters here, I sort of hope there is, but I understand that you shouldn't really judge anything based on what you actually read in the paper. Unfortunately, most things in the paper tend to be wrong, and the other half tend to have errors in them. So I certainly wouldn't want to judge anyone else's workplace based on sort of what they read in the paper, but unfortunately it does create perceptions that people actually believe, and it's certainly done that in the housing space. I certainly wouldn't want to judge the council and the work that you do based on the things that are in the paper, because often that paints a picture of quite negative arguments and sort of unsupportive approaches around many things. How true that is, I've got no idea, but I'm sure because it's in the paper, it's probably not true at all. I certainly owe it to my team to provide you with as much information as I can about the things that we're doing and the approaches that we're trying to take to make a difference. And I will go through these couple of handouts that I've just sort of provided very shortly. As I said, we are always open to suggestions and want to make a difference. We don't really enjoy working with negative people, so we try to take an approach of how we can actually positively connect together and make a difference. And just back to my media reference, I guess it must be quite difficult always finding the most negative things to report on and then reporting on them as inaccurately as possible. And certainly the housing issue is part of that space. Yes, we have 400 whānau that are staying in motels. Yes, that is far from ideal, but for many of them that's better than the alternative. For many of them, they're actually appreciative of that particular opportunity. We used to have lots of people staying, unfortunately, in parks and other places, and many people complained about that. Then we had people staying in a night shelter, and everybody complained, or lots of people complained about that. Now we've got people staying in motels, and people are complaining about that. I can give you an absolute assurance, as the number of social housing needs to increase, and it absolutely should, as it does, we'll have people complaining about where those social houses are and the effect that that has on them as well. And I guess that's just part of life. We have people that complain about everything. MSD's involvement in the housing space is actually really more of a supportive one. We actually do housing assessments on the housing register, and there are 700 people on the housing register in Rotorua that are looking for social housing. Everybody knows that there's actually a shortage of social housing, and we've been doing everything we can to engage with others so that the supply can be increased. I would certainly like to acknowledge Mayor Chadwick and Jeff Williams, the Council Chief Executive. We've had numerous meetings about the frustration, I guess, and about the shortage of houses, and not just houses. We've also talked a lot about employment, because I truly believe the dignity of work and the opportunity to have employment is actually a true circuit breaker to make a difference. So our conversations are often about the 6,000 houses that we're short, but they're also often about the fact that we need not 6,000 jobs for the 9,000 people that need work, but we need industries and employers that are prepared to give people a chance to actually engage in the dignity of work. The way the current labour market works for many people doesn't actually work. You have to have the shiniest CV, you have to apply online, you get rejection after rejection, and after being turned down 50 times, I guess it's possible you stop applying and you start being interested in how you actually survive on a benefit rather than thrive in work. So I do want to touch a little bit on some thoughts around what we could actually do differently in the labour market, but just going off my notes a little bit here, just sort of jumping, I guess, back to that housing space. So where we've ended up at the moment, thanks to a task force that's been working in the housing space, we've ended up with 200 contracted motels that have been assessed for suitability for longer term for whānau and children. Some of those spaces actually still need further work, and MHUD is the ministry that actually contract motels, and they have done that fairly quickly, but all the rooms haven't become available. But as of yesterday, 175 families had actually been moved into those particular motels and those particular rooms. Unfortunately, that has resulted in some single people being encouraged and required to move to other places. And our intention is to work really closely with the council so that the only places that people are sent to are places that are consented or meet particular requirements, and that's a work in progress. But I can tell you from my staff's perspective, about, 7 or 8 years ago, something like that, the government decided that every New Zealander should have the right to at least have somewhere safe, warm and dry to stay. So they suggested that people should go and talk to Work and Income if they don't have anywhere to stay. We were dealing with benefits and employment at the time. We're now dealing with the housing register. And I know from my staff's perspective, they do find it difficult when people turn up at 5 o'clock on a Friday or late in the afternoon. They have nowhere to stay. They have lots of underlying social issues. They have health issues. They have, all sorts of support and things that actually need to be done. And I obviously try to connect with my colleagues in other public service arenas and the health board, etc., to see what we can actually do about getting those services better aligned and better in place. You would have heard that there's going to be a housing hub. It's going to be the only one that's sort of in existence in New Zealand here in Rotorua, and Jordan and his team are going to manage the hub. I'm obviously giving them an assurance that MSD will be supporting them in every way possible. We'll have staff that are actually there. There will be staff that will be doing work and income assessments. And the reason I will make sure that we support that fully in every way possible, because my staff have been dealing with those clients for 5 or 6 years, often on their own, often with very little support and often with lots of criticism. So we will certainly be here to support the hub and do everything we can to make that work. Just another quick thing on that, because there seems to be a lot of confusion. I'm sure it's to do with reporting, but countries all over the world are facing a housing crisis. there's a massive short of homes with exploding populations. It's estimated that 1.6 billion people are living in substandard houses and 100 million people are homeless. This is according to United Nations stats. There's also 100,000 women over the age of 65 in Australia that are homeless as well. This is not just a Rotorua or New Zealand issue, it's actually a worldwide problem. Moving on to something more positive, employment, and employment has a circuit breaker. As I mentioned, we have 8,700 people here in Rotorua. We had an employer engagement evening a month or so ago, 6 weeks ago, where we wanted to talk to industry and employers about creating a different pathway for those New Zealanders that are furthest from the labour market, for those groups of New Zealanders who are often referred to as lazy or uninterested or not able to actually engage. Many of them have fantastic skills and talents. Many of them have goals and aspirations about having a better life. For those group of people, we want to engage with industry and employers in a way that we actually create opportunities for those that are furthest from the labour market to be supported, to be encouraged and to be actually seen as adding value. And I guess we all know with the demographics that are actually occurring around the world and in New Zealand with the ageing population, many of those people are young people, and obviously they're going to become a very valuable commodity. So in some ways we should be thinking of the huge opportunity that group of people actually creates for us. The ageing population is definitely here. In the Bay of Plenty we have 66,000 people on super, and that's increasing on average of just over 3,000 every year. So next year it will be 69, the year after it will be 72,000, and the number of young people and other people available for employment will be smaller and smaller. I believe it's the onus is on industry and employers to stop creating this view that there's all these New Zealanders that don't want to work, but actually create a better pathway actually into employment and supporting people. We've been working with the kiwi fruit industry along that lines for 5 or 6 or 10 years. And progress is slow, but progress is happening, and they're actually employing many more people permanent and long term. And we certainly see employment in the kiwi fruit sector as a great place to start in terms of paid workforce development. And 380 people from Rotorua were supported by minibuses and other sorts of transport to actually go to Western Bay and do kiwi fruit this season that's just finished. And for most of those 380 people, we're working very closely with them about how we actually reconnect them directly back to employment. I think I've sort of touched a little bit on the sort of numbers, but I just thought I would quickly go through these couple of handouts. Firstly, apologies, the first one's a little bit old, but I just had my last few copies and I thought I would share it because it actually has the contact details of a lot of our staff. It also has a lot of the information around benefit numbers in the Bay of Plenty and also particularly in Rotorua, and some information around some of the things we're working on. I've also been able to hand out one that's more specific for Rotorua that's actually got more up-to-date information. So just quickly going through them, just so that you know some of the services that we provide. We have a contracted services team. It's only one contracts manager and 2 contracts assistants, where we actually contract programs and services to help those that are furthest from the labour market to get trained and upskilled and reconnected to the labour market. And we spend about $13 million across the Bay of Plenty in that particular way. The exciting news for us is the government's actually just given us $11 million more to spend across the Bay of Plenty to help those that are on benefit for more than a year to reconnect back to employment. I would actually like to spend as much of that $11 million as possible in Rotorua. We have 3,476 people that have been on benefit in Rotorua on a working age benefit for more than a year. I would love for many of those 3,476 people to be given the opportunity to reconnect. So I guess my message to industry and employers and anyone else that cares, if they're interested in co-designing or having discussions around how we actually connect people back to the labour market, we're fortunate we have $11 million that we can actually spend to support that process over the next year. And obviously we'll be doing that across the Bay of Plenty, but I guess it's those employers and those industries and those communities that take up the offer the quickest or with the most gusto that are likely to get the highest percentage of that particular funding. We have a labour market manager, Brent McDonald, who covers the Bay of Plenty. Some of you will probably know him. Works in the labour market space. And one of the great things that we think is really important for employment is actually what we call an industry partnership approach. where anytime anyone's doing employment, we're prepared to pay for and support pre-employment training, usually of a shorter duration, usually aimed at getting the right certificates and qualifications so that when someone starts, they're as close to ready to go for that particular employer as possible in the process. To enable us to do that a little bit more, we're actually getting 3 more labour market advisors, and we're going to have one of them specifically focusing on the Rotorua cluster. We have a work broker or work services team that has 25 work brokers, and their main job is to connect with industry and employers. And if I didn't mention it, in the last financial year we helped 11,500 people across the Bay connect back into employment. 2,650 of those were from Rotorua, and our target for this year with the extra 11 million from government is to help 14,000 people reconnect back into employment. Obviously, if we have more people coming on the benefit than we have going off, we're actually not making positive forward progress. So the number of people on benefit is not a static thing. It changes every single day and it goes up and down. Obviously, our goal would be to help as many more people become independent or as close as independent as possible. So we're hoping we'll have a lot less than 14,000 people come on, so that the 14,000 people that are gone off help us head in the right direction. There's a little bit about housing and seasonal in this little bit of a handout. And in the Rotorua area, we pay out, I think, around about $260 million in benefit payments and around $260 million in super payments for people within the Rotorua community. I think I've sort of quite like just to leave the books and the information with you, but the reason I was excited about the opportunity to come and talk to you is because I actually believe that council and local driven initiatives supported by those that are elected to represent the community are actually best if they are supported and driven from a council or councillor perspective. So I would invite any of you that are interested in finding out about any of the things that we're working on, any of the programs that we're involved in, please just get in touch. My contact details are at the back of the book. And if anyone has any ideas or suggestions around who we might be able to engage with or how we might be able to work differently, we would actually certainly love to hear about that, and we are certainly available to have those discussions and cover that as much as possible. Sometimes we can't do things immediately. I do cover the whole Bay of Plenty, but I love spending as much time as I possibly can in Rotorua in positive, constructive discussions around how we can do things better. So thank you so much for your time this morning.
Well, thank you, Mike, and also Jacob for coming and support. I think the timing is absolutely perfect because there's been a lot of misinformation that just starts to spread, and you've actually nailed it. You're a walking encyclopedia of numbers, I have to say. But the one comment I'd like to make before we open for questions is it was very heartening for myself to be invited down with our Chief Executive to have a look at the service hub that you've created around housing and emergency housing. And I was incredibly impressed to see that the level of support and passion from your staff about supporting our families and into motels, and congratulations for those that have been placed. You've had some negative cover about that, you're always going to get that. Certainly that's one of the perceptions out there, that we are not focusing on families, and I saw it when I went to the centre, and I do encourage councillors to take up your invitation. Thank you, Mike, because when I saw the way that it is managed, not processed, actually managed with service support wraparound, I felt very heartened that, yes, we all say it's not the solution in the long term, but it's much better than when we were pre-COVID and what we were facing then. So I'll open it for questions really from the floor, and this is our opportunity to ask those free and frank questions. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Welcome, Mike, Jacob, tēnā kōrua. Just a point of clarification, because it's important we get the numbers right, and you've got so many numbers to rattle off, you can't make a machine gun there, but I think I heard you say you've got 200 contracted motels. I'm sure you mean motel rooms. Am I right? Yeah, so it's not 200 motels. How many motels are those rooms spread across? And
12.
Can you confirm they're not mixed use, they're just...
There's 12 contracted motels that are not for mixed use, that are solely targeted towards families with children, but some of those motels will have, on some occasions, some younger people and older people who are singles, simply because the room configurations aren't all suitable and ideally suitable for families, but the majority of those 200 rooms will be families.
Thank you for that important clarification.
Sorry about getting that incorrect.
Councillor Rotorua.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mike, for stating your case very well this morning in terms of the range of services that you provide, and thank you to you and your team. I'm well aware of you work at the sharp end for families that are very vulnerable, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Look, just one question I have, because a lot of the children now are living in motels, and when I was the CEO of Women's Refuge, we had women and children coming into our homes as well. But very little support services, wraparound services, actually focused on the needs of the children. And I heard the other day the presentation, and providers are now going to be supporting the families, and it's usually adult services that'll be provided. But I'm concerned about the children and what's going to be provided to ensure that they can thrive in that environment.
Yep, that's a great question. The 12 contracted motels all have full wraparound support services, so dedicated providers working with family plans and family strategies for every single family, which will include details of what's needed for the children and support that those particular children need. Unfortunately, that's only for the 200 families that are in those dedicated motels. We also have 7 navigators that are separate from that process, are actually working directly with individuals and families. Some of them have been working with families that will be being handed over to the new providers, so they will be available to actually pick up other families that are not in those 200 dedicated motel spaces, or singles that are in other motels. So that's one great thing. This is the only place in New Zealand where that level of support, those wraparound programs and those things actually exist. So in most places throughout New Zealand, people in social housing will access other specific social services based on their need, but they will have to go through the same process as everybody else. For those 200 families, they will have direct access to support, who will also not only manage their program and their strategy for them as a family, but will also connect them to the other services that are needed. For me, what I worry a little bit about is the fact that there's 6,000 other children that are in benefit-dependent families in Rotorua, and they also obviously need support. So we've been having conversations with education and other agencies around what can actually be put in place to support those other 6,000. And I guess, coming from my perspective about helping people independent, I guess if we helped as many of those 8,600 main beneficiaries back into work, then those children would be in a much better position as well.
We've got others that have indicated. Councillor Kumar, then Councillor Yates, then Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena Jacob, Morena Mike, thank you for your report. This is quite hard work, I suppose, having to face it every day and then to come up with something that's positive, because it is quite disheartening when we know what the situation is. My concern is around the fact that there are 200 contracted motels, mainly feel for Rotorua.
Units.
Rooms, sorry.
We just
units,
it's not motels.
Okay.
It's units.
Rooms, sorry, 12 motels.
12.
Yeah.
12 motels and however many number of units. My question lies in the fact that the people want to know, when is the situation going to change? When are we going to move away from these units or motels? They want to know long term, because this is still a short term solution. They want to know, they want to see if there is ever going to be a situation where these families are going to be in a better place. But currently, the locals that are living around there are struggling, and they have their situation on hand as well. So just looking at that perspective as well, is there any idea as to where the time frame may lie?
I would say it's going to be a lot longer than anybody thinks, but I'd like to think, and I'm really grateful of Jeff and the Mayor's support, and hope I'm part of the process of lobbying our colleagues at other agencies and other places about the fact that, from my perspective, some of the figures that have been talked about have been too slow and too low. I believe we've actually made a huge amount of progress in the last 3 months, and there's been a number of reports of property and things that have actually been purchased. I think the shortfall is really large, and I think it would be naive to think that it's going to be actually solved anytime soon. But MSD, unfortunately, we're on the end of dealing with the clients that need somewhere to stay rather than on the supply side of the housing equation. So all I can actually do is join in as part of the process of encouraging others to see Rotorua as being a hugely significant place and support them. And I think that has definitely happened in the last 6 months, and I've witnessed more progress, particularly from our colleagues at Kaingaroa in terms of purchasing of land and construction things in the last 6 months than perhaps I have seen for a long time.
And if I just remind you, Councillor Kumar, you voted against the motion to extend housing as one of the focuses of our own economic development agency. So we've got to work together here. So that's very critical that we add every bit of capability together to get that housing pipeline built. You have another question?
Just supplementary to it. So while we are putting these vulnerable families in this units and motels, are we taking repercussions that these families, some of them that have had caused hardship to the locals that are living around there?
Thank you for that question, because it's a good opportunity to clarify some of the mismedia that takes place around that. So most of those families were living somewhere else in Rotorua, perhaps on someone's couch or in someone's shed. Just about the majority of all people in Rotorua that need extra support for housing are from Rotorua. I can confirm at no stage have we ever had a bus that's picked anybody up from anywhere else, despite numerous requests to confirm that we're not bringing people from other parts of New Zealand. In fact, when they've been researched, most of the time there's actually been more people leaving Rotorua to go to other places than actually coming to Rotorua. And I've even had reporters ringing up asking when the bus is going to turn up at particular motels. So it seems it doesn't matter how many times you tell people that New Zealand is a democracy, people get to choose where they live. We don't tell people where they have to go. And if people have connections and other reasons to come to Rotorua and they justify what those reasons are, I guess we do the best we can to support them. But the majority of those people in motels were living somewhere else in Rotorua. They were in someone else's neighbourhood. I think we should focus on how we actually address the underlying social issues to actually create greater opportunity for everybody. Just because they're more visible to some people, they were actually in existence for a long, long time.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Mike. Nei rā te mihi hoki ki a koe, Jacob, hakopa, nā wā no tātou I mihi. Tuatahi mai, I do want to actually pick up on the very small percentage, and I do know that it is a small percentage that are causing the distraction and the bad behaviours across our city at this point in time, and focus on the positive, which are the number of families that you have been able to manage to house. Can I also ask you to potentially myth bust that not all of those that are staying in these emergency housing accommodation are unemployed? Is that a fact or is that a myth?
You don't have to be receiving a benefit to access support around housing if you actually are in housing distress. Anybody can actually approach Work and Income or any other agencies. A lot of the people on the social housing register are actually in employment. But it would be fair to say that those that are struggling the most in the housing space are those that have the least, and those that are often have been on benefit for some period of time or are currently on benefit. So obviously a high percentage of people in housing distress are also receiving benefits, but there are some that are not.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, both Mike and Jacob, tēnā koe. interesting facet in this report, and it's comprehensive, and I really appreciate the hard work that's involved in this whole area, is the dimension of koiki on unnumbered page. It indicates 11,088 living here in Rotorua. Can you project how that's 15% of our population here. How can you see that percentage of our population expanding, because you do indicate that that elderly population is growing? How do you see the future in this area? Thank you.
Yep, I think it will probably be similar to the increase across the whole Bay of Plenty, which is sort of around about 5% a year. So that 11,000 will probably be 11,500 in a year's time if I was to provide you an update on those figures.
And it's really interesting when you get out to the community hubs like Fordlands, when I went to a meeting there, to hear a lot of these people that are now in housing, our nannies and our koros who can no longer afford the rent, and they're really heart-wrenching stories, and they want to be rehoused back in their communities. They really want to go back into their neighbourhoods. So our hubs will help over time. Councillor Maxwell.
Tuatahi ke te mia o kia koe te whananga o te arawa. Jacob, tēnā koe, rawa koto hoa me kaere. I've got one question and just a couple of different things I'd like to add to it. One is, sometime last year, Mike, we came to a BA5 for the Chamber of Commerce, very good presentation you gave and some of the goals you hope to get going last year. I'm very interested in the course that Anne Hughes worked with the job seekers, the 18 to 28-year-old. You're going to start a program. I'd like to hear from you how successful that is gone, or is that, and if it's going to continue.
Absolutely, one of our target groups. Sadly, if someone signs up for the benefit at the age of 18 and either of their parents are on benefit, they're likely statistically to spend half their lifetime on a benefit. So one of our goals, of course, is to focus on young people and actually move them off as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, COVID's had quite an impact in that space, but I guess positive progress has actually been made. It is certainly doable. Before the global financial crisis in 2007, there was virtually no under 23-year-olds on benefit in New Zealand. The numbers were actually very, very small. So it is actually achievable, and it is definitely one of our main goals, and we would obviously like to make our employment pipeline, or a different way of connecting back to employment, particularly to help those young people that haven't been successful in the education system, that 30% that will actually leave with no qualifications, unfortunately probably waiting to sign up to get the unemployment benefit or the job seeker support benefit when they turn 18. We would love to create pathways so that that doesn't happen. In fact, we do have contracted services to work with NEETs and spend quite a lot of money having providers to actually come across and work with those children from the school system so that they can actually, instead of waiting for them when they leave at 15 or 16 to be 18, to actually work with them in the intervening years so that they don't need to come onto a benefit. So it's quite an investment that we already make and have been making for probably the last 8 or 10 years.
Thank you. And just further...
Can you just explain NEETs?
No, not in education, training or employment. So young people that have unfortunately dropped out of the school system and are often unoccupied or playing PlayStation until they turn 18 and sign up for the benefit.
Yeah.
And they're linked up with Youth Centre Trust too, with that contract now of Pūtaki Nui. So they're not competing for contracts for young people.
Good. And I just wanted to add also, I know that tourism's taken a big hit too here in Rotorua, and speaking to many staff from Te Puia who went kiwi fruit picking last year, thoroughly enjoyed it. And so that's that one, and all the best for the housing hub too, I too.
Thank you very
Looking
much.
forward to that.
Thank you. Councillor Wang, and then Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Mike and Jacob for coming to present to us today, and I really appreciate the numbers and the reports that have been provided to us. I have two questions here, and they're both relating to our children, our rangatahi. My first one is that I know, reading about the work that Connected is doing in upskilling and education and in that area, what work is being done in education and upskilling of our rangatahi and adults to transition from those jobs that are at risk of loss or disruption due to the effects of COVID? I mean, we've seen that, and prior to COVID, you know, tourism was, you know, almost 1 in 10 New Zealanders were employed in the tourism space, and that's directly, and, you know,
Yeah.
what work's being done in that space?
There were actually some specific government funding to actually, through the COVID period, to actually support people in terms of transitioning to other types of employment. Some of that funding is actually still available, but that Connected is actually really worth touching on. So there's a page in that book about Connected, and during the COVID period there was a lot of government support and services around apprenticeships and all sorts of things. In fact, there's 150 products that are available. If you actually go to the Connected website, it actually talks about most of those different products, which agency actually addresses them and how that works. It's intended to be an online type service. The web page is actually in one of those, in that booklet. But we also actually have a physical Connected sites in 3 of our work and income offices across the Bay of Plenty region, one in Rotorua, one in the mountain, one in Whakatane. So set up in the front of our office, there's actually a Connected space with a Connected staff member that's representing all of the government agencies around the services that are available on that Connected website. So if anyone goes into that website and there's a service and they want to understand it more and they want to talk to somebody about it, they can certainly go to the Work and Income office in Pukuatua Street, and there will be a Connected person there. I think the last one's just left, the new one's due to start in a week or two. So if you go next week, they might not be there, but the week after they will be.
Thank you. And my second point was around the younger ones, the school-age children and younger as well. And I know that for some of the children that are in this situation, they aren't going to school. They, unfortunately, some of them haven't even been to school before. And one tiny thing that, you know, for us, we really take for granted, and that's transport. You know, it could be that small thing that's holding them back from getting that education. And I know that there are incredible people in our community doing that work, and I know that the Deputy Principal for Kaitau Intermediate, Debbie Holmes, has been really instrumental in that area, transporting children from emergency housing, emergency motels to schools, and I really commend them on doing that and getting kids, helping them achieve to their full potential, really. And the question that I wanted to ask in this space is the work that's going on into getting children to school, helping them get to education, helping them have that education, and also whether or not you're working with the youth centre around that space as well, with the Youth Employment Plus and with the Te Hiringa pilot that they've just run, they've just started with Te Wari Kapuria Trust and also the Ministry for Youth Development.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you actually raised some really good points, and this is actually about how we make sure all this stuff is all joined up and connected so that we actually have a collaborative, joined-up approach. Our biggest investment in that space is with Wera, who's our social service provider that actually deals with neat children, but we are definitely connected to the Youth Hub. In fact, I think we're probably their main funder. We actually have staff that are actually directly engaged with the Youth Hub, and we're obviously working with education. Had the privilege of meeting with all of the school headmasters of Rotorua a month or two ago to have that discussion around those in motels and the Connected process around that. And even though the new contract providers will be taking responsibility to make sure that there's planning in their family plan for those children, we've actually provided additional funding so that service can continue for another 6 months. But if you get everybody that's involved in the youth space all into one room, you'll need a very big room. And I think the point that you make is how do you make that also all connected up? So here in Rotorua, there's actually the youth strategy that the Mayor talked about before, which was actually aimed at joining all that together and actually making it one cohesive service. I think they're making great progress, but it's obviously a work in progress as well.
Thank you, Chair. Tēnā korua. Mike, several times in your presentation you mentioned that employment was the circuit breaker, and you said that it would be good if industries and employers gave people the chance. So what are some tips or suggestions that you would give to local employers to give those people that have been on job seeker and have been out of employment for some time that opportunity? I know, for example, InfraCore, which is our council-controlled organisation, it has a social good function as well as a commercial aspect. So that's a business that is definitely looking to take on people that have been out of employment. But for an employer that has a commercial focus, what can you tell them as to why they should give these people the chance?
Actually, InfraCore is a really good example, and I better not quote a number because it might not be right, but I believe that they've employed eight people recently. They ran a program for 10 of our clients, a pre-employment type program where they would actually connect to those on benefit. We would actually had discussions with them around what sort of training and upskilling they would like, and then they would actually employ as many of those people as possible. I personally believe that an approach that evolves around people getting pre-employment training, getting supported for certificates, that actually has the employer directly involved in designing what the work is, but more importantly, coming to meet with the people that are on the program, getting to know them, because when they get to know people in person, they're often prepared to give people more of a chance than they would if they actually just do it based off their CV. We are really, really keen to create a local industry pipeline that's co-designed with industries and employers, taking into account pastoral support and all the needs that they believe that people should be or may need to actually be successful in their workplace. Because it's not just about getting people into jobs, it's also about making sure that they can sustain those jobs and stay in there for long term. So we're real interested in that process, and I think I mentioned before we had an employer engagement evening about 6 weeks ago, and we've had about 12 or 15 employers that have expressly indicated that they would like to be involved in that co-design process. Obviously room for many more, so if any industry and employers want to get in touch with us, we'd love to have conversations with them. We don't actually have specific products or pamphlets about the things that are available because we believe it's better to design it based on what the employer wants, what's actually going to work best for them. But we absolutely have funding and support, particularly to do the upskilling and the pre-employment training. And when we do that, we would always like the employer to be involved in the design and also make sure that they meet the potential workforce and get to know them.
Thanks, Mike. Great answer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and ngā mihi kia korua mō tō kōrero tēnei rā, me tō mahi I roto I o mātou, o tātou hapori. My question is actually for the working families and solo parents in our community, because we're hearing more and more with the increasing cost of living, the changes in the Tenancy Act, which is reducing the supply of housing, the lack of supply in housing in general in Rotorua, that people in our community who are working are also finding it really hard. And we have all had anecdotal evidence of people who are saying, I'm a solo parent, I earn a good income, but I'm still on the verge of being in one of those motels. So as the world has changed underneath their feet, are we looking at or re-looking at that financial support or assistance that's there? Because I know that the threshold and the focus has been on those who have a history or have severe needs, but there is also a large portion of people in our community that are just struggling to get by, and are those not middle income, but some of them low to middle income people that are finding that the cost has gone up, but the threshold or the criteria for them to receive assistance has not met that increase too. So they're finding that actually there's a gap there and they're not able to provide assistance. So is that something that MSD is looking at?
We're certainly aware of it, and we would encourage people to apply for the different products and services working for family payments. Accommodation supplement, there was quite a substantial increase in accommodation supplement about 3 years ago. Rotorua actually went from level 3 to level 2, which for most people was an increase of at least $50 or $60 per week. Unfortunately, I think the rate of rent increases has wiped that out fairly quickly. But I know that there is actually conversations around an accommodation supplement review actually occurring within the government. I think you raised some really, really good points. Unfortunately, probably as a public servant working for Work and Income, I can't really address all of those, but we'd certainly encourage people to get all the additional products and services and support that is available, the main ones being accommodation supplement and working for families. Yeah, but you're right, New Zealand does tend to be a little bit of a low-wage economy, and, that's something that a lot of employers are addressing by trying to pay living wages and other sorts of things, but you're right, there's a lot of people struggling. But certainly we believe that people are way better off in a working environment, earning, a living and having goals and aspirations for the future than they are on benefit.
And that was also a remit at local government conference about the accommodation supplement, quite hotly debated actually.
Thank you. If I could just ask another question. Thank you. Mike, it's about the influencer role that you have and the advocacy role that I think is very important, because all the figures that you've mentioned today actually paint a picture of the future as well for us. So do you play that role with the other managers locally, and you can put that information to Wellington to say, look, in 10 years out in terms of housing, social services, health, we're going to be coming smack back up to probably a worse situation if we don't start to tackle that now. So I know you're trying to do the here and now, which is so important, but it's that influencer role that I presume you're taking up the cudgels there.
The government is trying to obviously get government agencies to get out of silos and work more joined up and collaboratively, and one approach they've actually taken to do that is to appoint public service leads. And Ezra Schuster from the Ministry of Education is the public service lead for the Bay of Plenty region. So that actually involves getting the regional managers of government agencies together to talk about what the focus is for the Bay of Plenty region and how collectively we can actually support that. It's a work in progress. But yeah, I think the difficulty is there's probably not a shortage of ideas and opportunities. It's sort of about trying to make them actually happen that is quite often the difficult space. But I'm sure Ezra would love to come along and have a chat to you all.
He has offered, and also we're advocating to the task force ministers that we've got responsibility here, that we have a lead minister also overseeing our task force, so that we can really stop the siloed approach and unlock the doors quicker and more nimbly locally. Thank you, Mike, and I do thank you. Look, the one question that I couldn't answer when I was asked by radio was actually about the health and wellbeing and social services connectedness there, those providers that you've got together. Can other providers come in? I heard that Whānau Ora didn't want to be part of that, but could be commissioned if they want, if that need for that client arose. The DHB, is that a moving group in our social
I believe it is. I think because of the speed that it was actually done, the way that HUD actually did it was sort of more of a closed type approach of approaching providers that they believed could get going quite quickly. We've had conversations with other providers. They're aware of the situation, and that collective of providers have agreed that they're happy for other providers to join in. And we have Whānau Ora and some other providers that actually have navigators. And we're having discussions with them around how that navigator service could also be connected to that hub of providers, so that we have one consistent. The last thing we want to do is start supporting families and that's not supporting them to the end of the journey. And that's one of the other conversations we've had with those providers, is that we want the service to be much more than just about housing. If you get to know whānau and people, how do you actually support them all the way to the end of where they need to get to? And in my view, hopefully independence.
Well, thank you, Mike and Jacob, for coming. Look, that is showing exactly how we have to work, and we're so fixated really on the future of local government. What will it look like? I believe the task force approach to housing here and then to going on to building and supply of land and future building, that's the way we've got to work together, and that's what the future of local government really is in the future, but partnering with social service agencies and lead Crown agencies, iwi, and also the philanthropic sector. So it's been great getting a bit of myth busting this morning and fact checking, and thank you for coming and presenting to us. Do any other councillors have a question? Because I want everyone to have an opportunity so that we can be part of promulgating the right information on our various channels. No. Councillor Bentley, you don't have a question? I'm offering you one if you wish. Right. Kapai. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Kia ora rā koutou.
Right, thank you very much. We move back to item 8 on the agenda, reports back on elected members' attendance at conference. The reports back, I understand you've got one tabled last night, Councillor Donaldson. I don't know if all...
Thank you, Worship. I fired it into Hilda, but she tells me it's going to be on a future agenda.
Yes, and similar, great. So I don't feel that it was only a week ago. Please don't be too harsh, Hilda. We usually get it back. This cycle's quite quick after the conference. Yes, Councillor.
Can I just say, Your Worship, this year's conference was live streamed, so I'm not sure if colleagues had an ability to or an opportunity to zoom in on anything that was of particular interest. But also, Local Government New Zealand puts the presentations up online and they will be there at a future date.
Well, we'll move into discussion after we've had a mover that the report, the mayoral report back on Local Government New Zealand Conference 15th to the 17th of July be received. A mover? You move? Seconded, Councillor Yates. Right, so we'll now discuss. But thank you, you've raised a very important issue there about others being able to see the live stream. There were some amazing presenters. I'll take mine as read, but I do want to just reiterate my observations at the end of it, that the way we are approaching here at Rotorua Lakes Council about localism, you know, the very issue that Mike Bryant presented this morning, this is a Rotorua solution with a Rotorua task force. That is the way of the future, when council can put itself in the centre of actually leading on the four well-beings, and that became very evident at conference that is important. I must say too, I have never seen such strong representation from iwi. It was phenomenal. Te Maruata met the day before the conference proceedings began. From the first year that you went, Councillor Maxwell, it's a very big group now, and I'm sure others who were there will report back there, but that was a profound difference. You saw a partnership coming through, reflected in our body of Local Government New Zealand now, which we didn't see 10 years ago. So that was quite profound. And they also had a kitty where they laid down a challenge for us as a local council to pick up when we got home about how we could contribute to something that we can report on at next year's conference. And we're working with Te Tato Te Arawa about the vision document and how we can make that real in terms of working alongside our long-term plan. So that was great. And the other endorsement back was a strong endorsement about the approach we took, and I understand there's been some criticism about our co-governance committee on the Three Waters locally, but at that conference this was seen as innovative, the first in New Zealand, and a new way of working together on the challenges that we're all going to face in the Three Waters debate coming up. From the 1st of October, we have got 8 weeks of some very important decision making in front of our council, and we are well placed with our governance committee that we formed before the conference. So I enjoyed the conference. I actually found it was difficult for me. I was away from our other colleagues. They put me in a different hotel because I think I booked first, and that was not in future. I'd really recommend that we all stay in the same motel. It's that networking and who's going to which workshop and who's going where that I really missed. I'm sure you all had a lovely time together, but also I'm aware that they were out of town and needed transport to get into town, whereas I was able to walk everywhere. But thank you for the opportunity of participating, and I reinforce that we're very well placed with our long-term plan to face the big challenges that we've got in the future. Do you want to speak to what you're going to table at all, any councillor?
I'm in your hands, Your Worship. I do have a hard copy of my report, but you know, I think it was such a big conference that I think the venue and certainly the accommodation struggled to cope with it, and then of course we ended up on the brink of a civil defence emergency, and so unsurprisingly my wetland field trip was cancelled because we had no water wings or life jackets. But I'll leave it for another day, I think.
Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I was very pleased that I was able to attend, so I want to thank councillors for supporting my going to Marlborough or to Blenheim. But there's no doubt, and you just mentioned it before, most of the younger members there actually were Māori, elected Māori young people, so articulate, and their voices are being heard. And as we all know, next year when we go to elections, there'll be 35 councillors around New Zealand the day after the elections that will, for the first time, well, possibly not the first time, but they'll have Māori councillors. So, you know, it's going to change the whole face of it. But the other thing is, we don't want to make comparisons, but there are some councils that really don't seem to be over the current speed of change and the pace of change in all areas that are confronting local government. So, as I said, it's the networking, and when you hear what they're doing and you think, my God, we were there 10 years ago. I mean, you don't want to make comparisons, but if we don't keep up, we'll get rolled over in terms of, yes, what's happening. The environment is just, you know, just zooming along. So, yes, thank you.
Councillor Kaifong, do you?
I'm wondering if maybe my report could be left with Councillor Donaldson, since I see mine's about 20 pages. So
I have to say to all members,
that includes
Councillor Kaifong was everywhere. She was, my golly, you were networking and making the most of it. We all did in our own way. Great, thank you. Councillor Maxwell. Now we'll open for questions.
Well, question as well as I want to say that I thoroughly enjoyed reading the report, and the fact I was very impressed with that Minister of Local Government, Minister Mahuta, stayed for the whole time. Now, I haven't seen that in the past, you know, but they're lucky to be there for an hour or two. But so she obviously showed interest in the portfolio she has. I did send my apology. I phoned the chairperson of Maruata, and let her know a couple of weeks before my apologies for not being able to be there. So that was lodged down there. But I also just want to say I was thrilled to hear about a Paiki getting a very good award on with their projects over there, John Forbes becoming a life member. So, kia ora.
And it was a previous mayor, Don Rystra, whose daughter Lynn received that award that night. And Don walked the corridors of Parliament 30 years ago with that vision And John Forbes, who became a lifetime member of Local Government New Zealand at the AGM, couldn't come because he's in Australia, but it was just wonderful to see Opotiki, the Supreme winners that night. It really was. Councillor Yates.
Ai, me mihi ka tika mō tērā rīpoata, and I'd also just like to acknowledge, because at the Zone 2 meeting last week in Taupo, a special acknowledgement was actually made with regards to the way in which we're conducting the co-governance for Three Waters. So Rotorua was spoken of very highly at that particular hui.
Councillor Wang.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to pass on my thanks to everyone for voting in support of having a young elected member seat on the LGNZ National Council. It's a first ever, big move, and really appreciated.
Oh, it was overwhelmingly endorsed. I think that was a total majority. So we're understanding diversity even within our own member organisation. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, and we can offer you an opportunity to speak to your report once we've read it, Councillor Kaufel. And also we caught up yesterday with Te Taru White and Jude Punny, who were down there and very active too, and that was a fruitful discussion about how we integrate the Te Arawa vision with our long-term plan. We'll bring something back to Council about that process going forward. Right, we don't have to vote on that at all. We do. Oh, we do. All right, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Right, we move now to Councillor staff reports on page 27. And this is a recommendation on councillor lead roles. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the report, that the report councillor lead roles 2021-22 be received. Do I have a mover? Councillor Rotorua, seconder Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. I'll just overview the report, and I've given an explanation. Oh yes, there is an update that's going to be handed out. Oh, sorry. So I have given you the reason why, and I said after the election that in November 2019, when we look at committees and then we look at councillor roles, that I would no longer work with portfolio leads, and particularly knowing the challenges ahead of us, and to have an alignment where the council organisation is going to make things more nimble and responsive. I've talked to the leadership team about the responsibilities for councillors for the remainder of the term, so that we can now that we've passed the long-term plan, and that was absolutely critical, that had to be supported by a majority, and then look at making alignment with being able to support our council to actually deliver these objectives. So these are the new leadership roles. I don't wish to speak to them other than to say that we've also said to Te Tato or Te Arawa there may be interest. They may have interested members that really want to get behind some of the support here, and to add value from their perspective, and that door remains open. The other issue that has become, and this is the revised here, that the very, very urgent issue that has emerged that needs a link with the link minister in Wellington is that of housing. And so I've undertaken to take that role to liaise with the housing portfolio ministers and lead that and be supported there by Councillor Tapsell. And thank you, Councillor Rotorua, for then understanding that the scale of this is enormous. the issues that we covered off in the long-term plan of housing and community safety and working together. So I've asked Councillor Rotorua Tate if she would lead the Thriving Communities and Community Safety and be supported by Councillor Yates. So this is my prerogative to make this call, but it is a leadership team approach that will work alongside of the enormous workload. If you just look at our council staff already, they are working very, very hard to deliver some very big stretch and ambitious targets. So I hope this is seen as positive to actually work beside you. There are some other committees, and I'm aware that there are some that we have to also look at tidying up, but I only wanted to announce the lead roles today. And I think those that are picking up this lead, these are going to be significant work streams, and now you've got the council teams and alignment for you to work alongside. So there may be some questions about this. Comments? Councillor McPherson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. My question is, can we please have terms of reference, key performance indicators, and any revised compensation arrangements for these lead roles? Thank you.
We haven't even discussed that yet. You had to get the long-term... We haven't discussed anything about remuneration yet. We had to get the long-term plan approved first. So all of this will come forward in due course. Okay. I'm announcing the leads, and when you've got the leads, that's when we begin to develop exactly how we can deliver terms of what the terms of reference for these projects
supplementary?
are.
A supplementary?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. It's difficult to understand the nature of these lead roles unless there's clarity over their specific terms of reference and what would count as key performance indicators. So I wonder if some thought can be given to those questions with regard to these lead roles.
Absolutely, and
Thank
we'll
you.
work those up together as a leadership team. We note that. Any other questions? No, well, thank you. And now the issue here too is, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I'm just a little bit surprised to see me supporting in the housing portfolio. I wish if we had a discussion earlier so I didn't have to raise it like this, but previously when I was leading the housing portfolio I had some concerns which I shared with you and others, my fellow council colleagues, and so I'm just not too sure why I'm there on the housing, but I am happy to be leading the active and engaged communities, but I just have those concerns around the housing, because if I'm going to be involved in something, then I want to be, actively involved in it, and if I'm going to have any leadership role, then I expect that I would have the opportunity to lead it, and currently I don't see that as a councillor I would have much influence in terms of the housing when so much of it is dictated by this government, and that's my concern on the housing.
Oh, I see your concerns there. No, Kapai. We can have that discussion, so that can be ongoing. That can be subject to discussion. Certainly. Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I have to say that the ones that I'm there responsible for lead thriving communities and community safety. I really look forward to getting stuck in that area. That is significant. That our community sees itself as being the desirable place to live, and safety is absolutely up there at the top of the list. So I really look forward to working constructively with Jeff and the seniors team to pull something really great together there that we can action and see the benefits from. So I'm absolutely delighted to be picking that up. Thank you for the opportunity.
Right. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
If I can just make a comment, because the issue of KPIs for leadership has been raised, and I will stray into my report back on local government conference and point members to what is probably the most inspiring keynote speech I've ever seen on the issue of performance of people and leadership. And that was by a chap, Jamie Fitzgerald, who some of you may have heard of before. He walked unsupported to the South Pole. He also holds the record for rowing across the Atlantic. But the point he made in terms of leadership, he also actually recruited and organised or led the recruitment and organisation of 6,000 volunteers for the Rugby World Cup. But the point he made regarding leadership was that, and it applies to elected members in my view, is you have a debate and a discussion about the direction the organisation takes. You may only achieve 80 or 90% agreement, but there needs to be, from leaders, 100% commitment once that level of agreement has been reached. And you put the debate behind you and you show leadership moving forward, and you support the majority view. So I think that is the key performance indicator. That is the key to leadership in an elected member's role. And of course the litmus test is the subsequent election every 3 years. I just throw that, I encourage and I recommend that presentation when it comes up online to members to have a really good look at and a think about. Kia ora.
Thank you. Right, we move on now to the Council representation on Ngāti Whakaui Gifted Reserves Committee. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the report that the Council representation on Ngāti Whakaui Gifted Reserves Committee be received. Gina, do we need to overview this report? Well, we'll do the receiving. Does somebody a call for a mover? Councillor Yates, seconded Councillor Rotorua Lakes. All those in favour? Contrary? Carried. Gina? I think we'll take it as read. Yeah. And I wish to congratulate you for being nominated and the approval for you to be on this. That's going to be a very important relationship role for you, Councillor Tapsell. One that we did discuss, but some time ago. Gina, do you want to say anything?
Are there any questions?
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you.
I move point 2, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Second. So all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried.
Can you just record that I didn't vote? But thank you to my colleagues. Thank you.
I remember, Councillor Tapsell, you raised this issue in the first term of Council when the Gifted Reserves Protocol was discussed, and it's lovely to see now that you are a member on the Gifted Reserves Committee. Congratulations. Right, we move now to delegations to resolve appeals on Plan Change 3 to the Rotorua District Plan. I need a mover and a... you want to present this or break for a quick...
Present it. Oh, sorry.
How are you feeling? Plenty of energy? Keep going. Righto. I call for a mover and a seconder to receive the report that the report delegations to resolve appeals on Plan Change 3 to the Rotorua District Plan be received. Do I have a mover? Moved Councillor Rotorua Lakes, seconded Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. John Paul, you're going to review and come beside you.
Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. This is very much a process paper, so I won't go into any other detail other than to just acknowledge Kate Darm from the District Plan team and Kim Smith, who have put together very pragmatically and concisely and worked through the process to get us through Plan Change 3 to this point where there is only 3 appeals. So this is obviously a process opportunity for us just to, if possible, move through a mediation type approach which reduces the costs, obviously, to council, but also those appellants. So we just need to make sure that we have someone with the delegated authority to enter into those mediations. So I think Kim's just got a slightly modified resolution that she can just guide you through, which reflects that ability to delegate down to Mr. Ward.
We are proposing that we replace recommendation 2 with just some more specific wording, that council delegates the chief executive to appoint Jason Ward, Manager, Planning and Development Solutions, who is responsible for managing RMA policy, the power to agree on behalf of council to consented outcomes to the appeals on Plan Change 3 significant natural areas.
Appeals, this is a process issue about who's going to be our appointed agent. Are there any questions? Councillor McPherson.
Yes, when I read the original, my concern focused on the implications, and I don't want my comments to be construed as being critical of the Chief Executive or Jason Ward. They're not. It's about the level of delegation and the nature of that delegation. And it could be that my questions are best handled in the confidential staff report on the update on appeals that comes up later in our agenda. But my concerns are these, that when we had that howl of protest demonstration last Friday by the farming sector, it highlighted the unanticipated consequences of SNAs on the productivity of farms. And I wondered if there was sense in pausing the appeal process to allow farmers to raise concerns and therefore have access to alternative dispute resolutions other than the ones that are being talked about here, such as direct conversations as encouraged by the Environment Court. And my part 2 concern is that this proposing a delegation to a third tier official along the given lines, could it be appropriate to consider delegating such powers to a person with appropriate RMA experience and knowledge and who is seen by the farming sector to be independent of council to facilitate the mediation process? What are your thoughts on this? Thank you.
I would just make a view there that only one of the appellants was a farmer dealing with one specific piece of property. So the question you raise there about a more general is not related to the specifics of Plan Change 3. So we've been through a robust process to review those outstanding SNA boundaries and issues that had been identified at the conclusions of the district plan process when we went operative back in 2014, 2015. So the scope has been quite narrow. So most of what you've asked is quite general. When we actually have a specific issue and a specific appeal to be addressed, and that is in a process around the RMA, which also has its logical conclusion with the appropriate sign-off of the Environment Court. So I don't believe that would be an appropriate way forward, considering we're in that process now.
Thank you. Any other questions? Right, thank you. I'm going to put the... I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder to the motion that Council delegates the Chief Executive to appoint Jason Ward, Manager, Planning and Development Solutions, who's responsible for managing RMA policy, the power to agree on behalf of Council to consented outcomes to the appeals on Plan Change 3, significant natural areas. We have a mover, Councillor Rotorua Tate, seconded Councillor Wang. Is there any further discussion? I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Well, I will call for a mover to go into confidential and public excluded. There are 3 items for consideration in the public excluded session: the confidential minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of June 2021, the recommendations from Operations and Monitoring Committee, Plan Change 3 update and urgent economic recovery project request. The reasons are commercial sensitivity and or industrial negotiations. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. So at this stage, we'll pause. We'll have, we will break for a cup of tea and be back here at 20 past. Yeah. Thank you. And we'll turn the mic.